I'm so excited to be able to introduce this next event, as it seems to be a real perfect fit to so many of the themes, the ideals, and the practices at the core of our work this week, today in particular, whether in place-based education or in the restorative practices that Cornelius mentioned in his Q&A this morning. But before we get to that, a reminder that this conference is brought to you by all of you, our wonderful attendees, and our sponsors: Holistic Think Tank, Cortico, Antioch University, Education Evolving with Teacher-Powered Schools, and Unruler. You can find links to their resources and programs in the Discord, and later on linked below this video when it goes up on YouTube. And I'm pleased to introduce Jennifer Chace as she helps us understand partnering with youth to co-create schools fit for human beings. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for leading us in this today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for having me. I always find these to be just as nourishing for me as I hope it is for the participants. Spending the time really thinking through what to offer is just a joy. So to have a place to bring that is just wonderful. And I wanted to say, I have a close relationship with two of your sponsors. My master's degree in education is from Antioch. And I have a close partnership with Cortico to do a lot of the work that I am going to speak about here today. Unfortunately, I can't join their presentation tomorrow, but in any case. So I'm going to share some slides with you all here. Oh, good. Someone else is an Antioch alum too. Yay. Great. And feel free. I mean, I don't really know, everyone has a different set of expectations, for chat and asking questions or whatever. I'm totally comfortable along the way if people want to put a question in the chat. And Nick, I don't know if you're going to then voice those, or that's totally fine. If you want to say, oh, it looks like there's some questions building up, let's get to that. That's totally fine, or we can do it at the end too. I hope that there's a good amount of time at the end for us to talk about things and discuss, and I have some prompts for that if we need them. So I actually called this Creating Hope because that other title is just way too long. So I wrote that title and I meant it, but really, when it comes down to it, is I'm hoping that these classrooms that are fit for human beings are really classrooms that are creating hope, and in some of the work that I do, I talk with the youth about what it means for them to have a good life. And sometimes people ask me, why do you ask students, what does it mean to have a good life? And my answer to that is, what is school for if it's not to lead to a good life? It's not to support, not even just lead to, be a good life, and then support a future and continued flourishing. So anyway, that's why you're not in the wrong place. Don't be confused. This is where we're supposed to be. So I wanted to start off actually by giving just a philosophical and a practical argument for youth participation, because sometimes we need that, and sometimes I talk about this at the end, but I really feel like I want to start with it today. And in a way, this timing or order of events, Nick, is perfect. I feel like I heard the last presentation. It's yes, this is so aligned. You're going to hear lots of, I don't want to say overlap, but mutual reinforcement here. So I'm just going to kind of go through this argument for why this matters. Why should we even be having a topic around this? And the first one is that people are purposeful beings, are purposive beings, right? We all come here with a purpose. We're born into the world and we are motivated to do things. We have purposes, we have goals, and we also have the ability and the desire to relate to other people, right? We're all relational, we're all social beings. We can't exist as an individual. So that's a take that for granted. And if that's true, then all people have a right to live out their natural human capacities, their natural human elements. And in that way, then they need to be able to participate in their social environment. And what do people do? They're working towards goals. They're envisioning a better future. And so students have a right to participate in that envisioning and in co-creating those environments. And if we don't allow them to use those elements of themselves, their basic human capacities, we can just say that's ethically wrong. And there's a whole argument that can be made about that. We could do a whole course or class just on why that's wrong. But I'm just going to go with, I think we could probably all agree that that's wrong to prevent people from living out their essence of what makes them human. So when we dehumanize students, we're dehumanizing ourselves as well. And that's a pretty well-known concept around racism, for sure. But here, when we're dehumanizing students, we're dehumanizing ourselves too. And so there's this cycle of reproduction. Thank you, Nick. That's there. We are mistreating ourselves when we are mistreating these students. And so then we can look at like the practical outcome of this as disengaged youth, when they're prevented from using their basic human capacities and therefore prevented from participating in envisioning and creating their environments, they lose hope. They lose hope. They're disengaged from themselves. They're disengaged from their environment, and they lose hope. They become homeless. And I'll talk more about that. And that leads to, of course, youth mental health plummeting. And we've seen that in the last couple of decades, pretty steady decline. And I'll give you some stats on that in a minute. So in disengaged youth, also kind of separately, disengaged youth decline to participate proactively in our democracy, right? Why would they? It's hopeless. I am not a participator. I've been cut off, blocked from myself and from that desire, that natural capacity to participate with others. And so at that point, you see what we have been experiencing now and hearing from some young people. I mean, really, literally, young people are saying, voting is, it's kind of nice. But, as long as the option is good, I don't know that I really need to. Autocracy not only becomes perhaps desired, it's a little easier, it's more convenient, but almost necessary, because at that point, our young people don't develop the skills. They don't develop those natural human capacities to participate, to make choices and work together with each other to create this vision, this future vision. So that's the philosophical sort of practical argument for why this matters at all I wanted to offer. But so why do adults resist this, right? Why don't adults just understand this naturally? Well, there are a lot of different arguments for this, and I'm going to give you this argument. And this argument is, it really relates back to our neoliberal capitalist economy. And as I said, one could make this argument in many different ways, but this is the one that I'm offering you here today. So this neoliberalist capitalist economy, the point of it, or the method by which they accomplish the goal, is to inflict this extreme disassociation from source. And we can define source in lots and lots of different ways, but the speakers who were speaking right before about this mindfulness, becoming more aware of your conditioning. We're conditioned when we're disconnected from source, from what our natural essence is, from our kind of purpose for being here. That regenerative source. And for people, some people are religious, some people are spiritual, some people are naturalists, some people are relationists. There are all sorts of ways that we can talk about source, but it's something greater than ourselves. And so the point is to disassociate ourselves from that, to individualize ourselves, hyper-individualize ourselves. And so that hyper-individualization has led to this banking model, and I use this broadly in like a beyond probably the Freudian sense, that this banking model conception of the purpose of school. The purpose of school is to put information into individuals. That's the purpose. So, and we can't do that. We can't insert information if they are sourced and connected to their other ways of knowing. They're more essential ways of knowing. We don't want them to have other ways of knowing. We want to tell them what they should know and how they should know it. So that leads to this banking model, input only. It's one directional, it's not bi-directional. And when this happens, the idea is we're replicating individuals, right? We're replicating students. We're manufacturing. I actually am right now in this conference room at a school because I've been doing strategic planning with a group who really has having to move past this manufacturing model of education, stamping out students. So in that process of being stamped out and sort of, through a mechanistic sort of process created as a student, youth check out, they become absent. They are not presenced by us, by adults. And so therefore they become absent. And in that absencing, we adults absencing the students, they stop caring. They cut themselves off from that. And I don't want to say they stop caring in the deepest possible sense, but at the basic level, they stop caring and they lose the capacity to engage. They don't develop that natural human capacity to engage. It withers. What we don't use goes away. So in that human desire to participate and matter, when that goes away, youth are going to withdraw, perhaps. They may drop out of school, but they also might resist or refuse. They might resist adults' activities with them, the adults' looking to have, this banking model, insert information in them, they might refuse to go to school. And so in that point, right, you have adults who now think the problem is the students. Look at these students in front of us. They're disengaged. They don't care. They're acting out. They didn't even come to school. They don't want to participate. They don't want to work with us to create school. They don't care. And they put the blame on the students, the young people themselves, which of course is incorrect. And so then, right, we have the adults who think that the students don't have the capacity. And you know that what you believe about your students is more meaningful than anything else to your students. If you believe that they don't have the capacity, you can bet that they are going to believe they don't have the capacity. So now we have this circle, right? And it perpetuates this need for control. So I just wanted to say too, for those of you who have been teachers for a long time, you probably noticed that like this wasn't always this way, right? It wasn't always this way, more or less, right? We had a little bit of this here there last 50 years or so, but the point is like post No Child Left Behind, this got worse and worse and worse. And so when you see the youth mental health statistics, they have been going, for a while going down and a little bit precipitously, of course, in the last, say, 4 years or so. But teachers have been pushed more and more to the limit to squeeze these test scores out of the students. And, maybe I went to high school in the 80s. All my teachers weren't great and warm and fuzzy, and we weren't doing, the kind of level of standardized testing as we're doing now. But the fact is there was some lingering belief that was about human thriving and about civic engagement, like a lingering belief there. Now there is no doubt that is not what it is for. There's no lingering belief about that. And so the outcomes, we can actually connect them right back to the mission of the I live in Maine, the federal Department of Education, right? And I'm going to read this to you because I want to get it right. This is their mission. Our mission is to promote student achievement and preparation for global competitiveness by fostering educational excellence and ensuring equal access. So equal access to participate in that system. That's wonderful. So that's the point. That's the mission of education here in the United States. So this is all happening in this context. When people want to look back and say, why? And of course, there's social media, there's technology, there's a lot of things contributing to youth mental unwellness at this point. But this is certainly one of them. So, oops. So what can educators do in your classrooms about this? You can reconnect to source. You can reconnect to your purpose. Right. So in education, if we really want to think about what are we here to do in education, it's to serve this individual in front of us in the context of their community, right? Who are they coming into this world, into their community, and how do they become themselves in that space? And how that happens is by the adults modeling that, creating that vibration, so to speak, in the room. And I love to actually, now we don't even say so to speak, now there's like scientific evidence for us all vibrating together. That was just, I don't know, in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, but what we knew before, now there's scientific evidence for. So when you pause and slow down and do all the things that we just heard about in the last presentation, which I loved, when you pause and reconnect with your purpose, why are you here in this classroom? Why are you not making lots more money doing something else? Why are you not doing something easier? Why? And it's going to be individual for each of us. And I bet there would be we'd have a lot in common, but there's going to be individual for each of us. Why are you here? And when you connect to that, and you connect to what resources are you walking in the woods? Are you meditating? Are you feeding yourself healthy food? Are you connecting with your family, your friends, the cosmos? When you pause and you begin to vibrate with the universe and not alone, you're moving into the future of the flow with the universe now in confidence, without control, but with confidence. You can let go of your need to control your students and invite them into that flow. And they'll feel that. I guarantee you with 100% certainty that when you walk into the classroom, connected to your purpose, your intention, confident that you are going to work in the context of your community right there, your classroom community, to co-create together this environment, trust in your students to also be connected to that. You're inviting them in. They will come in with you, maybe not the first day, maybe not the second day, and maybe some of them on the first day. That's what happens, and it's our responsibility as the adults to create those conditions for that. But we can't create those conditions for it without first doing it ourselves. So in that emergent space, that's where the co-creation begins to happen. And you're creating, in that moment, you're creating the conditions not only for this co-creation, but now for them to matter, to feel they matter, and to feel hope. So now I just thought I would just give you a couple of statistics, because what's a good slide deck without a couple of statistics? So the problem, we talked about why the problem matters. We talked about the problem itself, some outcomes, but this is a little bit more about like the size of the problem, right? So these are statistics from the CDC. The percentage of high school students who've experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness during the past year. This was in 2021. So, kind of middle of the pandemic here. And you can see there are lots of groups here who experience this much more strongly. I mean, much, much more strongly. But if we just look at the total for a moment, 42% of students felt sad or hopeless persistently during the past year. And that means, I think it's 2 weeks or longer. And it has to, and that also is very specific, that sadness or hopelessness had to stop them, prevent them from engaging in their regular activities, stop them from engaging in life. 42%, 57% of girls, 69% of the LGBTQ plus community, right? I mean, jaw dropping. I talk about this all the time, and I still physically feel this every single time I say it. And it should be stimulating to us. So here are the results of that problem. So on the left, percentage of high school students who made a suicide plan during the past year. 18% of all students, this is across the United States, made a plan to end their lives last year. That's how hopeless they felt. 10% of them attempted. 10% of them acted on that plan, 10%. So if you have a class of 30 students, 3 of your students attempted to take their lives last year, for example. If you have a school of 500 kids, how many of them are trying to end their lives? It's an enormous problem. And the results of this, you can see for some of these other demographics, are way, way worse. So this problem is, to me, is well worth spending my time on. So my purpose here is to help people understand the gravity of the problem, and then what we can do about that. And there are lots, as I said, there's social media, there's technology, there's poor health, there's racism, there's sexism. I mean, there's so many other components to this. But to me, the essential point here is, if students don't feel connected and feel they matter, they can't possibly have hope. So now I want to talk about mattering a little bit. We know that mattering, feeling that we matter, is related to feeling hope. So depressive symptoms in the past year, and this, just to say, actually is just from students in the state that I live in, Maine, but we can say it's probably somewhat representative of students in other places as well. So 47% of students in the last year weren't sure or strongly disagreed that they mattered in their community. So that's a bit, for almost half of the students who felt that way experienced depressive symptoms. Only 20% of students who felt they mattered experienced depressive symptoms. And then 26% weren't sure, disagree, strongly agree, they mattered in their community. 26% of them considered suicide last year, whereas only 9% of the students who felt they mattered considered suicide last year. So in looking at this, we can infer that students who feel they matter have more hope, have less need to feel that there's no possibility for their future to be better. So I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit here and say, when do students feel they matter, right? And I don't know if this is going to work or not, So I'm going to give it a shot. But as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I have a partnership with Cortico, who has a presentation tomorrow, which I'm sure will be fantastic. So you should go. I can't participate in it, unfortunately. I'm doing something else. But basically, I hold focus groups of students using Cortico's technology. And I am able to lift out their quotes and lift them up and play them for other people to be able to listen to them. And I'm going to try it. Let's see if it happens. See if it works.
And a specific time when I felt I mattered to my community would be when we hosted a vigil at the community church for the school shooting that happened in Florida a while ago, or was it? Yeah, it was Texas, sorry, a while ago. And we all came together, and it was just beautiful to see all those people. And it really felt like something I believed in mattered to everybody else too, I guess. Mm.
So yeah, I'm with an organization called the Ursic Teen Leadership Camp, and it's under AMHC, which is the Ursic Mental Health. I forget what the C stands for, but something like that. And it's a camp that we put on every year for middle school age kids to teach them team building skills, leadership skills, and then also like to kind of give them the facts about different substances and stuff like that, so we can try to get the substance abuse levels down for that age type of thing. So being a part of that, I think that definitely means a lot, to the community.
Right. In both of those examples, you can hear that what matters to them or what makes them feel they matter is this contributing, right? They're doing something. Here, this first one, Lexi says, time I felt I was important was probably this meeting. She was invited to participate in a strategic planning process I was doing with the district at that point. And she's like, time I felt like I mattered right now. You asked me to come. Alyssa's talking about, it's important that students get the opportunity to lead no matter who they are. Henry talks about, and actually I'll play this one. It's about the relationships.
I'm William. I'm in Kennebec County in Augusta. And I guess time when I felt like I mattered was on Step Up Day. Mr. Kempton came up to me and asked me how it was since I'm new to the district.
How many adults do you think would say kids care if they walk up and say, typical adults, a high school student, maybe a junior, male identifying junior, does he care if the principal walks up to him and says, hey, how's it going on Step Up Day? Right? Like we tend to dismiss that and just kind of feel like, what do they? They don't really care. They deeply care. It matters to them to be seen, to be asked how they are, how they're doing, how they're feeling, how it's going for them. So in a way, like what we can infer from this is that students matter or feel they matter when they're contributing, when they're making a difference, when they're actively participating with adults and others, peers. And it really feels like it's important to them that they're seen. And I could have put a lot more of these quotes up here about students asking to be seen by and have relationships with adults. Those two things are really important. They're kind of critical as foundational steps. So if we look at this mattering, looking back now, connecting mattering back to well-being, when we feel we matter, we can have hope. When we feel we matter, when we contribute to our community, right? When we're doing something. And having a community implies having meaningful relationships with others so that we can go to relationships plus contributions leads to mattering. So thinking about the students when they're in relationship, when they have that, we talked about purposive and relational beings. Well, when they're in relationships and when they're making contributions, they feel they matter. And we feel we matter, we can have hope. And hope leads to well-being. So I want to offer briefly this framework for schools to nurture hope. It's based on a really well-researched theory by a psychologist named C.R. Snyder, and many of you may have read his book. But he has developed a theory of hope that talks about 3 different dimensions of hope. And those are brought into this framework in a way that I feel like is accessible to teachers. And so he talks about goal-oriented thinking, and pathways, being able to take those pathways to those goals, and being able to have the skills. So here's a way for us to think about this as a way for students and teachers to implement this in the classroom. So the process of meaningful contribution, the first one is imagine. So perceiving a better future, and this can relate to goals, and this is about thinking. So first we have to imagine that there's something better. And how much imagination cultivation are we doing in schools these days? Not that much. So that's important, though. You can't strive for something that you can't imagine. So how do we develop students' imagination? First, they have to perceive a better future. They also have to believe. They have to have confidence in the skills, their own skills, to make change. And they have to have confidence in the enabling environment. And you can bet that the adults are the major contributing factor for that enabling environment. How are the adults creating the conditions for them to use those skills? They have to trust that the adults are going to be behind them. That doesn't mean trust that the adults will agree with them on everything or give them everything they want. That's not important. It's seen and supported and I would say enabled, facilitated. And the last one is strive. So really striving towards that better future. It's not about achieving the better future to begin with. It's really about striving, creating and using pathways toward the goals. So they need to be able to do that, creating and using pathways toward goals. So when students are able to perceive this better future, they feel confident in their skills to make the change, and they have this enabling environment, they're able to then create and use pathways towards those goals. So those 3 things really need to be in place, but they also need to be in place really clearly in the context of relationships. And relationships are certainly a part of believe in that the enabling environment, but I really feel like it bears repeating and highlighting that this is in the context of relationships with others, peers and adults, right? So really specifically in terms of the teacher's role, when I said connect to source earlier, we need to take the first step. When we say, well, the kids don't trust us or they don't respect us, it's up to us to set that tone. So we take the first step always, right? So we see them. When we begin to see them, they can begin to see us. When we can begin to trust them, even if they don't appear trustworthy at the beginning, reminding ourselves of why that is the case, how we got to that place, and how we can trust them, how we can respect them so they can respect us, how we can set a model in the classroom of being connected to our purpose and aware of our environment, aware of our impact on our environment right here in the classroom, so that they can step into that social field we have created for them, so they can step into it and begin to vibrate with us in that way. So they're in a way are mirroring what we're offering. So, but this really takes slowing down, noticing, and lots of practice. It's a practice. That people in the last presentation were talking about that. These are practices, and eventually it becomes second nature. And you can invite me to your school if you want, and I'll help you with that. But it's a practice. So, how can we cultivate meaningful relationships at school? And what is a meaningful relationship to begin with, right? It's one thing to say, let's have meaningful relationships, but what makes something meaningful? So I'm defining it here as allowing a meaningful relationship allows both parties to be seen, to grow and change, and to be their best. And that be their best is this evolution towards the highest future potential. It's not about getting your student to the place where they can be their best. It's about us seeing their evolving potential. Wouldn't we love that, right? For people to look at us and say, I see Jennifer at her best, her highest future potential. I know she can get there. I know she's evolving towards that. That's the image I'm holding of her, as opposed to like, ooh, you're only as good as your last lesson. That's a harsh reality sometimes here in education, right? We don't want it to be that way for us or the students. And so these kinds of meaningful relationships are generative. They're going to generate possibility. They're going to enable us to move into our futures and the students to move into their futures together. So in a way, how we can do that is what we talked about already, being present, connected to yourself, your purpose, and source. And when I say source, it really is individual. What is that to you? But it's your higher, I would say your higher way of knowing. So one of the questions you could ask yourself is when you walk in the classroom in the morning, what do I want to have as the result of my actions? And does this connect with my intention? If my intention is to build relationships with my students, and I'm acting in a way, and I just had to speak with some teachers about this today, but we're always trying to do that. We always offer these moments for them to come and talk to us, but nobody comes. Nobody comes, Instead of putting it on the students, say, okay, whatever I'm doing, it's not resulting in the action that the students want to come. So how do I do something there so that the result of my actions will be that they want to come and talk with me? And you want to be open-minded, of course, right? So being present and connected, but being open-minded, being curious about the student. Why did they say that? Why are they doing this? That's really interesting. Something I don't understand yet. As opposed to, oh yeah, that's what they do. Yep, check. That doesn't allow them to grow. And then being open-hearted, caring, compassionate towards the student. And actually there's, again, some of the work and the people who came before us were talking about this too, but it's really not the same as sympathy. It's really important to differentiate. It's not like, oh, okay, I understand, which almost sympathy almost leads almost like towards pity or something like that. But this is compassion. This is standing next to, in a way, like in solidarity with, not trying to like fix everything for them, but feeling compassion. And then being open-willed. This is the hardest. This is definitely by far the hardest. You're really wanting to create the conditions for the future to emerge with this student when the two of you are together, which means maybe you have your plan. And I'm as a teacher, I'm a down to the minute planner, like my lesson plan, or even when I work with schools or districts, it's like down to the minute, all the things we're doing. And then when I get to school, I go, okay, it's over there. Now what's going to happen? Now that I have in my own mind my intentions and how I might get there, I can't control the 30 variables in the room. They all come with their own intentions, their own plans, whether they're conscious or not. And so when you let go of that need or that feeling that you have to control or that you could even control with them, that's this open willing. I'm open to the possibility that's going to come and be created in this space when we are here together. And when you are able to get to that place, that trust that what they get is what they should get, it's what they themselves have gotten, as opposed to what you have inserted into them, they'll feel the difference. They'll feel the difference instantly. In the moment, they will feel the difference. And so together, this is a way for teachers to feel resourced, the teachers to feel nourished. Being in this flow experiences is one of the most satisfying experiences, right? When we get, whether you're an artist or a musician or a teacher, whatever it is, that feeling of like being in the flow. The time has gone. Who knows where the time has gone? You're out of linear time experience. We're not in that world anymore. That flow. That's what it feels like to be in this space with students. And when you create that and you're in that space as a teacher, you yourself are feeling much less likely to be burned out because you're being resourced right there in those interactions with the students. And really, I'd like to say this, like, this is quite literally, like, you are creating the future there together. Like in that moment, who knows what's going to come next? You don't know, because you are creating it together with your students. So now we talked about relationships. How do we enable meaningful contributions? And what is a meaningful contribution? And so I'm going to define it here as meaningful contributions are initiated by the student. Meaningful contributions aren't, you've been assigned community service and you're going to the nursing home to play music for them tomorrow. Now, not that that's not a good thing to do as a teacher. I have done that exact thing. Hey, class, we're all going to go to the nursing home and we're going to sing, songs for them or whatever it is. It's not that that's not valuable. But what we really need to put our attention on is where are we allowing our students to initiate? Where are we leaving space for them to say, I wonder if we could. I wonder if we could. I wonder if I could. That's what we need to leave space for them to initiate, for them to have the idea, and for them to voice the idea. and in service of a greater purpose. I wonder if I could be free to drive away during the school day when I don't have a class. That's important, and we should talk about that for sure. And that's about policy change. And I work with that all the time, and we should talk about policy change here, even in this context. But thinking about it, the most meaningful contributions are initiated in service of a greater purpose. And so when students work with teachers on policy committees, they are serving a greater purpose. It's not just about them. It's about supporting the school to be the best place for everybody. So in order to do this, we have to know the student and know what matters to them. And we have to show them. When I ask students, how do you know that a teacher, how do you know the teacher knows you and sees you? Right? So I've asked them that. What signs do they give? And they'll say like, oh, well, they'll say, I noticed. Or they'll bring me something like an article or a book recommendation or something that shows they know me, they see me. Maybe they notice something about me, and I've heard this, that maybe they notice something about me that I didn't know before. So it's the active communicating these to the student to show them. And this builds trust when you show that you care about what matters to them. And time again, it's pretty amazing. Students, when I ask them to, I'll say, does it matter to you in terms of how much you trust adults? Does it matter to you with adults that you're working with, say, towards a greater purpose? Maybe there's like a policy change project you're working on, just for example. Does it matter if you're working for more same-sex bathrooms with adults in your equity team or something like that? Does it matter that you achieve your goal? And 100% of students, and I've talked to a lot of them, say, oh, no. They're almost confused as to why I would ask the question. And I say, okay, so then what matters? How can you tell, or how can you then trust these adults if you're not getting the results you want? And they said, they always say, well, it's about that we're like, they understand and that this is really important and we share a common goal. Or maybe sometimes they use the word vision, but rarely. They really talk about a sure, or we care about the same thing and we're doing things together. We're working together on that. Whether they achieve the goal or not is less important. It's that the adults stand by them in solidarity and say, I get it. Let's do something together. And so I just gave some examples on the bottom here because, teachers come from all sorts of different grades and they might say, oh, what does this look like in nursery school? And in nursery school, early childhood, it's a lot of like, I wonder if he might need a hug as the example. And of course the student's like, oh, okay, I wonder, you're modeling that. I wonder what needs to be done, but you're not saying he needs to, you need to go say, I'm sorry. It's, oh, I wonder what he needs. And then the student is left free to have their own initiative come to take action on that. Or the early grades, how can we do something to help that? Oh, there is a lot of litter outside in our playground. I wonder, could we do something about that? That gives them the option then to say, the opportunity to say, could we? We probably could. What could we do? Or in middle school, what do you think might make this better? You're beginning to shift a little bit cognitively for them to be like, I could. What do you think we might do to make this better? And then for high school, just an example, let's talk about how we can do something about this. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how we can do something about this. Invites them into a side-by-side conversation. You're standing next to them. Let's talk about it. So really briefly, I just want to give an overview of what your school can do together. There are a lot of words on this slide. I'll just warn you, way too many words that more words than should be on a slide, but I want it to all be together visually. And so we won't take time to look at each one of these, but I want to give the overall concept. And that is that the baseline for this is creating a vision. It's having a vision, an imagination for a better future, right? And we're talking about this for your school, or your program or your classroom that prioritizes your students' feelings of mattering. So first it's like, I have that intention. And then after having that intention, now, okay, so what's my mental model? How can I understand how these things fit together? How does this work? That's like it becomes more mechanized as we go up. Mechanized isn't the right word, but it becomes a little bit more abstract. But how do I understand my role? How do I understand how these things fit together? How do I, as I put here in gold, how do I shift my awareness to include students? It becomes a little more practical. But then it's also not just kind of this understanding of how the parts fit together, but it's about culture, it's about feeling, it's about heart. And it's about making those decisions in the moment to prioritize the mattering and the well-being, the human in front of you. It's about prioritizing presencing, being present for that person, for those students, and not absencing. And so what are we doing when we're absencing? We're sending a clear message. And is that ever the priority we want to send, the priority message we want to send? And practicing your listening skills, there are so many ways to do that, and modeling those kinds of things. So culture. And then we can look at the structure. How do we make sure that this is embedded in everything we do? How do we make sure that every single aspect of our classroom and all the decisions we make, that it comes back to that when I do my lesson plan, when I set up the physical space of my classroom, when I do my calendar, when I do my plan to outreach to parents, like whatever it is that we do as teachers, how do we embed in that these ideas? And I did mention, just because here we are with Chris and Nick, I have to mention, using critical pedagogy and teaching change-making skills explicitly. Now, do I propose that you create a change-making curriculum for your 3-year-old class? No, you have to think about, how does this change over time, but the principles are there. Absolutely. And so I'm done. These are discussion topics that we can talk about. What does hope, creating hope, look like in your space in terms of relationships and contributions? And we'll come back to that. But I just want to say I also have some references on here for the data and some other resources for you. And I will share this wherever there are places to share things. And I put my contact at the end. So yeah, we've got 10 minutes. Awesome.
Great. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Anybody have questions here? Were there things that you saw pop up, Jennifer, throughout there that you want to tackle? I know Peter had this interesting question that perhaps we could bounce off you and anyone else here in the chat, but he asked, how do we measure hope? Is it sort of a self-reported thing? Skylar mentioned this hope survey here. What tools do we have to help assess if our students are hopeful or not, I suppose?
Yeah, I actually didn't read the chat at all as it was going, because I figured that you were going to be like, oh, stop, there's a question.
No. All good.
Okay,
all good feedback in here.
Yeah. So yes, there is a hope scale, and it's actually called Snyder's Hope Scale. So Snyder, I referred to earlier. It's actually only 6 questions for youth. And it goes up to kind of classically or traditionally, it goes up to kids who are 16 years old, but people have used it all the way through, say, like 19-year-olds, and it's really pretty much accepted to go. But there's also an adult hope scale, which is a little bit longer, a little bit different. But so there is a survey, and it's a Likert scale. It's super easy, super quick to fill out. So that's one way. I would say that's the main way that people assess hope. You can also look at some of the adjacencies. You can look at the statistics on depression and that I showed in the beginning, to kind of look at like what happens, what are the results of hopelessness, and also look at that data in surveys. The other aspect of this, really, and I'll just then leave room for other people to join in and what they think, is to really, like, as educators, use our capacity to really see our students, and if we really, I would say, have good relationship with our students and really notice their different, every day they come in and what do they look like today? How are they? You can see these little subtle shifts and hopefully steer things and help them before they would get to someplace like being hopeless, but a lot of that is teacher observation skills. I don't know, maybe other people have other things to add.
Perhaps too. I'll bring Tish's question into here too about engaging parents deeply in this work. That seems to be another through line throughout all of, our conversations here the last 2 days have been about how, rather than just kind of struggle in our own little bubbles, how do we get parents engaged in embracing change, advocating for these kinds of things, or just simply understanding, the kinds of partnerships that we're trying to make. And if they say, hey, I'm too busy, I'm going to defer to you as the expert to manage those things, fine. But how do we get them engaged in the process?
I actually think that this is a critical question, because so much of the time I see I'm sure I was guilty of this as a parent when my kids were little. Okay. So just to say, self-disclosure, a lot of the time when parents of younger children will say, I want them to have lots of choices. I want them to develop to be free thinkers and all that. And so it's like endless choice for the little child. But then miraculously, they get to be 15 and all of a sudden we don't want them to have any choices anymore. It's like, oh, no. And we rein it all in, and then of course, then you get rebellion, natural rebellion that of course should happen when all this reining in is coming. So I feel like enlisting this parents in this project is really, really useful, especially if they understand when they do these things that we're talking about, the educators can do, their relationship with their children is going to be so much easier. So much easier. How can we together? Now, it's different when you have a 10-year-old than you have a 17-year-old. Those are very different spaces, and children develop and change and gain capacity and skill, but the gesture is the same. So yeah, I totally love that. It's really inviting them in. And I always think, I talk about myself as a teacher. For me, here's something you might want to, I just want to offer this. This is something that's worked for me, but everyone has a different style. Has anyone, I don't know, maybe people have already worked with this idea with parents trying to bring something of practice. People want to jump in, that's totally fine.
I think one of the problems is parents are only parents for a short period of time. It seems weird when you are raising kids because it feels like it goes on forever, but my child just turned 41, and it's really weird because that time period seems so small now in my whole lifespan, right? So I think keeping people engaged. I mean, now I'm a grandmother, so I have a new engagement in a certain way. But I think, but all of us need to see that these children are our collective future, not just our individual future. And I think that is the tricky part, is how do we help everybody see that how our children flourish or not is going to determine the collective future of everybody.
It's also one of the reasons, Tish, why, as I said, I was here doing strategic planning with this district in this other conference room. Big issue, why the community is always complaining about their taxes. Oh, I don't have a kid in the district, or, oh, my kids are all grown up. I don't know. No. I'm going to leave. I'm going to move someplace where there aren't any taxes for education because I don't have kids. But you're exactly right. And that's people being disconnected from this fundamental principle that seems so obvious, right? When you state it like that, like, how can people not get that? But they were brought up also in these systems, And so it feels really important to bring these things, these ideas that the school is a creator of community, not just in the moment, but the future of how these children are is how society will be. And so what kind of town do you want to live in? Yeah.
Just think about the mental health costs down the road. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. We're not really good at that kind of thinking. We tend to be a little bit more short term, but yes, absolutely. Getting the whole community. And actually there's a group in Maine called the Maine Resilience Building Network. And I actually gave their website on my resources resources slide. They have a whole campaign that's called Youth Mattering, and they go into communities, businesses, any place that will have them to talk about mattering and how it matters a lot that youth feel they matter to everybody, and that it's about community well-being. It's not just individuals.
Kind of ironic too, that the more traditional models of school that just kind of keep it within the four walls of the classroom, where the rest of the community, businesses, people without kids don't really see what's going on in there. So what drives their narratives of school is everything else: media, politicians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I was just looking at this report from today that said that the parents of people who have kids in schools feel great about schools. And it's the people who don't have kids in schools who feel the worst about schools because they're the ones who, whose opinions are being driven by, primarily toxic propaganda about what's happening there. However, if we do shift those narratives about what's happening in school and make it undeniable, right? Bring kids into the community, bring the community into schools, develop those community partnerships, send kids on field trips, bring in parents and speakers and all those other kinds of things. Well, then they can't say that, because then those are people that they know, right? They know the kids, even if they aren't their kids or their grandkids or their friends' kids, it makes it kind of self-evident what they're doing. So of course, then they know, where their tax dollars are going or whatever their excuse might normally be. But yeah, that's a shift that can actually help build bridges, not just between parents, but between communities too.
Oh, 100%. And because when they're invited in, not just invited in, but I have to say brought in, like almost like made, the opportunities have to be like undeniably, they have to participate in some way. Make it just not that they feel forced, but that they feel somewhat compelled, put it that way. Then they, as you said, they know the person. Now they have a relationship, whether that's a great deep relationship yet or not, but now I know that superintendent. Now I know that principal. Now I know that teacher, and I'll say that like in that way, there's a lot, the onus somewhat, unfortunately, because we're in the education world, is on the educators, is on the principals, is on the people in the school system to now set like that tone setting, that vibration setting that I was mentioning for students. Teachers and school district leaders can do that for their school boards, can do that for the community. Now, ideally, the school board would do that for the district, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that one. Just like I say to the students, if you feel like your principal is not open to hearing you, how open are you to hearing them? And I always say, I know it should be on the adults, but guess what? I'm here with you. I'm not here with your adult, right now. So we're going to talk about how you can do that. But yeah, there's also inviting people to shadow. If you invite a prominent community member, give them a written invitation, or even better, a verbal invitation. We would love for you to spend the day with Juan, and he's going to bring you through his day so you can experience school with him. Hard to turn that down. Really hard to turn that down.
Another aspect of this too, of course, it comes from earlier in your presentation where you had students in their own words in the Local Voices Network and the Cortico parts. Those are just such valuable pieces to just bring to the community or to curate into some kind of report that could go to the school board, right? You could present that stuff to the school board and say, here's what kids are saying about their experiences of school, or what they want, or how they're feeling about various cultural aspects of things, right? What they want to see changed. And it's not you being Jennifer or Nick or Lynx or anything else. Then it's kids in their own words that they have to either listen to or ignore or reject or whatever.
It's so true.
That kind of becomes on them. Yeah.
I don't know if who here might be familiar with Bayo Komolafe, but he talks about fugitivity. And if you don't know Bayo Komolafe, it's not Reverend Bayo Komolafe. You might find him online. It's not him. It's Dr.
Drop
Bayo.
a link.
Oh yeah, I will. Okay, I will. You would love him. Right up this alley. Anyway, so he speaks about fugitivity. And it being a fugitive scholar, being a fugitive activist. He talks about post-activism. But the idea is we don't want to ascend to positions of power within a sinking ship. We want to build a different ship. And so he talks about, yeah, exactly. I love this guy. And so he talks about this idea of like, how in that building a different ship, you got to build it and you have to invite people over to it. And in some ways, like you don't want to announce like, hey, I'm building a different ship right now until you're kind of ready. But what are the ways that you can kind of go like this? And so this, Nick, I'm playing the fugitive role so what I do is I actually go into school districts. The school brings me to work on research and leadership skills with students. And so in that research and leadership skills, they do qualitative research. They do focus groups with their peers. They learn listening skills, all that. They learn all these things. They collect the voices. They own the data. I mean, I own the data really, but they own the data dissemination. They create a presentation. They share it with the school board. So they're the ones standing there. They've selected the voices. They play them. The school board listens to them. And this just happened the May or so in this little district that I was working with where, the superintendent saw that I was doing this and was like, our kids deserve this. And I thought, she doesn't even really know yet. But the students proposed that they needed school board representation. They needed kids on the school board, which is becoming more and more normal. But a lot of districts just aren't aware of that. And so when the school board saw the work that they did, saw the data they had collected, heard the voices, saw the time and effort, there was no freaking way that they could in public say, nope. There was just no way. So they were like, of course, that sounds completely reasonable. Let's get started on how we can make that a possibility. So that's kind of like my fugitive way of getting in there and changing the system without announcing what I'm really there to do.
That's awesome. Well, shoot, we have hit the wall of time here. Unfortunately, this would be a good chance to remind people in the chat that if we need to transport links and conversations to Discord to carry things on over there, that's the beauty. Again, we started this conversation talking about the affordances of a flipped space, of an asynchronous kind of conference, and that is definitely one of them. So. And in fact, we have another session immediately following this one. This is a back-to-back-to-back packed day for us all here. So huge thanks to Jennifer and to your work. We'll have the video and everything up here very shortly. Thank you so much. Jennifer, where can people like find you if they're like, I want to find and connect with Jennifer?
Yeah, definitely. And just to say, I put bios, a web link to his page for Bio Kumalafe, and I can't recommend him highly enough. So you can find me at on Instagram at The Source School Maine. So The Source School Maine. But then you can also get me at jennifer@thesourceschool.org. And then our website, you Google The Source School, and we are not the one in Thailand. I don't know, there's another one in Thailand, but we're the one in the United States, The Source School. Love to connect with everybody, and I'm on your Discord stuff too. So yeah, thanks for coming, giving me the opportunity to talk with you about this.